Hey, yo, what's good? This is my Hands of Stone, The Life and Legend of Roberto Duran book review. This book was released around 2006. It's by Christian Guides, and it's about 310 pages. It's a good read. It's a pretty quick read, even though I procrastinated in reading it. But when I got down to it, I finished it rather quickly, actually. As many of you know, Duran's my favorite fighter of all time. So I was like, man, I gotta know more about Duran's life and his legend. And if anyone has ever wondered why Duran was ever so popular and so loved by the people and by the fans, by the boxing community, if you just really don't understand why, you need to read this book. This book delves into it, man. It really does. This book starts off the day of his birth. Um, his mother. It was June 16, 1951. His mother was giving birth, and her mother's mom, his grandma, she left, and she went to a bar. And this is the legend, right? His life starts off with the legend. That's the legend of Roberto Duran. His grandma leaves and he goes to a bar, and that's where her husband is, Roberto Duran's maternal grandfather. And she just goes into the bar, and Duran's grandfather had missed the birth of all his other brothers and sisters. And so his grandma goes into the bar, and she's like, dude, she's giving birth. And he's just drinking. And he stands up, and she just knocks him out. And that was the day of Roberto Duran's birth, June 16th, 1951, man. Roberto Duran grew up in the neighborhood of Chorrillo in Panama. It was a very poor neighborhood. And he grew up fighting a lot. And he had a type of mentor before anybody, not even his stepfather. Oh, let me get into a little bit about his father. His mother was let's just say a little promiscuous. She had several children with several different men. And at that time, US troops were around the Panama Canal, and that was a few towns across where they lived. And it was Margarito Duran who was friends with Duran's mom's brother Toti, his uncle Toti, and they were homies and they were cool. And Margarito Duran, he was a big dude, a tough guy. He would get into brawls a lot as well, and he was just tough. He was a brave dude, and he beat fools up. So Margarito got with Duran's mom after all, and after a while he was an American troop. He was Mexican American from, I believe it was Texas or Arizona. And he eventually left. Duran's mom said that she didn't want anything to do with him ever, so he was never really there ever. So Duran never grew up with his biological father. He grew up with this man named Victor Vargas. And this book delves a little bit into the Panamanian history. It says how the nation was formed and how then it got into independence from the United States. It starts off pretty historically. If you're interested at all in history of Central America, it's very interesting, filled with politics. It will later go on to all the other politics of Noriega and the drug trafficking that happened in Panama, the involvement with the U.S. government. So that's another reason to buy this book. Buy. Not buy, not goodbye, but to buy. So Duran, like I said, he grew up poor. He had a mentor, even though he liked his stepdad. He loved his stepdad, but he never really saw him as a father. he would cruise around with this kind of clown figure. His name was Chaflan. They call him Chaflan. And he was kind of a clown, a street artist, you could say. He would do tricks and stuff like that to get money in the streets. Kind of a beggar, but he would try to earn it. So he taught Duran the value of money, the value of working. He had Duran shine shoes. He had Duran sell newspapers. He had Duran do tricks. He taught him how to wrestle. Duran really loved wrestling at that time. And he was really good friends with Duran. And a lot of people, they would accuse him of being a pedophile because he would hang out with all these kids and be out in the streets with them until late. But Duran says no, that Chaflan was a pure man and that he just wanted the better. He just wanted to improve these kids' lives and have them work. That's all he wanted, and that there was really nothing wrong that Chaflan ever did. So Chaflan was kind of Duran's first mentor. And in this time, Duran's brother, he was starting to box. So Duran's like, oh, I want to start a box. Duran had already been in tons of street fight. He was a fighter since he was born. Duran, he would give money that he would make selling newspapers since like 4 a.m. And for a kid to do that in Panama at that time, it was very dangerous. Panama was very dangerous at that time. So he went to the gym. He would just watch his brother, train, and he loved it. He loved everything about that. So the trainer's like, you're not ready. You're not ready for that. He's like, yeah, I am. I am ready. So he eventually put him into the ring, and Duran was Duran. He loved to fight. He was whipping people and sparring, and he became an amateur. And I had the understanding that Duran had no amateur career. But actually he did. As an amateur, he was 29-3. Some sources actually say that he was 13-3 or 18-3. But he did have an amateur career. Maybe it was a short amateur career. It was 32 fights, but he did have an amateur career. He did turn pro at 16, but he did have an amateur career, and he had the chance to fight in the Pan American Games, but the politics of the Pan American Games at that time didn't allow him to compete in it because he beat a fighter that was the most popular one, and then they kind of just disqualified Duran or put him aside, so they didn't let him. He was devastated, and he just eventually turned pro. He turned pro with the help of a promoter. His name was Carlos Eleta. This man was a wealthy man, and he had known Duran since he was a boy. He first met Duran stealing coconuts from his house, and he was like, "Yeah," and he said, "I couldn't be mad at Duran. I could not be mad at Duran for stealing coconuts because he just had this charm to him. He had the charm to him." Even as a child, he always had that charm to him. So Duran started his career devastating foods, as we know, knocking people out. And there was some fighters that were tougher than others, but he was still beating everyone, like his fellow Panamanian, Ernesto Marcel. He knocked him out in the 10th round. A few other tough fights, like Benny Huertas, even though his record wasn't the best, he still presented one of the hardest challenges for Duran at that time, one that he really needed. Hiroshiru Kobayashi, who he knocked out in the first round. I think in that fight was where Carlos Eleta, the promoter, the manager, kind of took notice of Duran. And I also believe that this was where they started calling him Manos de Piedra. So he fought a few more fights, and then he got the Ken Buchanan fight, the infamous Ken Buchanan. So Ken Buchanan beat Ismael Laguna, who was Panamanian, and he was a Panamanian lightweight champion. And Duran, while he was coming up in the pro rankings and the amateur rankings, Duran had looked up to Ismael Laguna because he was Panamanian and he eventually became a world champion. So he looked up to Ismael Laguna and he wanted to be like him. He wanted to be a world champion like him. And this was a time where he was coming up, of course. And he really wanted to fight Ismael Laguna because he was his idol. He wanted to fight him and he wanted to beat him because he was Duran after all. But Ken Buchanan beat Roberto Duran. Duran beat Ken Buchanan, as we all know, in that brutal fight. Ken Buchanan was a slickster Scotsman, and he was just getting his butt kicked throughout the whole damn fight. Came the 14th round. No. The 13th round, it was just a devastation. It was a mauling. I gotta say, it was Duran mauling Ken Buchanan. And in the end of the 13th round, the bell rang and Duran hits him with like the biggest low blow of all time, and the referee stops it, declares it a knockout for Roberto Duran. This fight, it gave several options to what they should have done. Ken Buchanan got up and he was like, "No, I'm good. I could still continue," but the referee stopped the whole fight because of it. And from that low blow, Ken Buchanan went to the hospital, and a vein burst in his testicle, one of his testicle, and he had to take. I think he had the water drawn out of that. And he says, to this day, I think of Roberto Duran every time I take a piss. And Duran's like, he would have done it to me. So that was Duran's attitude. He just wanted to seek and destroy. His legend was real, man. His legend was real. Ken Buchanan, he's learned to live with it. He's like, it still sucks, but I've learned to forgive Duran. And Duran was like, yeah, he's one of the best opponents I fought. So Duran takes his championship back to Florida, and the rumors about the parties, and he partied hard. Duran partied hard. The people of Panama adored him. He adored him. Duran gave money away like it was nothing. He gave money to people. He gave money to children because he remembered when he was poor. And his lightweight reign was great. Knocking fools out. There was that trilogy with Esteban de Jesus. Esteban de Jesus was a Puerto Rican, and Duran could not stand Puerto Ricans. So the first fight was in New York City. Duran had been partying. He was out of shape. He struggled to make weight, which was a recurring theme in this whole book, by the way. So he struggled to make weight, and then he got in a car accident, so he had a hurt elbow. I think his lip was like cut in half. So he came in with all these injuries. It was a non-title fight, and Duran was dropped in the first round and never really recuperated from it. So came the rematch. Duran said that he was robbed by De Jesus, but everyone's like, dude, come on. But he wanted the immediate rematch, but his manager, Carlos Celeta, wouldn't let it because he's like, he knew he wasn't in shape. He wasn't in shape for that fight. And that problem wouldn't be solved by the next fight. Duran went on, defended his title twice in a reign, man. And most of his fights up to then were knockouts. And then he rematched Esteban de Jesus. This was where his mom, Duran's mom, Clara Samienago, his mother, which he loved dearly, she believed in witchcraft, and as Duran believed in like Santeria and all this stuff. And his mother thought that Esteban de Jesus had put witchcraft on Roberto Duran, brujeria, as they call it in Spanish. He thought Esteban de Jesus had put brujeria on Roberto Duran, so she tried to counter it. And Duran's like, dude, come on, mom. But Duran believed in all that stuff too, so he believed in all that. So came the fight. That chapter is called Esteban and the Witch Doctors. So come the first round, Roberto Duran gets knocked down the first round again, and this was pretty much clarification for Duran's mom to declare this. Oh, brujeria! It's the witchcraft. But Duran came back. He got his revenge. Probably the sweetest victory up to that point. Duran still went on to party, but he went on to impress. His image kept how could I say, expanding. His legend kept growing. There came stories from his family where his uncle Socrates was a big man and he would knock out 5 people at a time. Oh, I forgot to say this. A few legends of Roberto Duran when he was younger. Roberto Duran loved to hang out in bars. Yes, he loved to drink. He loved to go into bars, hang out for hours and hours. And in one of these times, Duran was heading home, and five people jumped. It was from the bar. 5 people tried to jump him, and he beat them all up, one at a time. One at a time, Roberto Duran beat them all up. 5 grown men, and he was 15 years old. I'm gonna say a few more. Roberto Duran, you probably heard of this one. But that's how tough and a born fighter Roberto Duran was back then. Roberto Duran was in a bar. He was drinking and drinking. Everybody was drinking. And they couldn't pay their tab. So they didn't have enough money. So the bar owner was like, hey, man, what are you going to do? Somehow this came up that a guy's like, hey, if you knock out that horse outside, you won't have to pay. He's like, all right. So he cold cocked that horse with a straight right to the jaw, knocks him down. The other story of that one is that Duran wanted to drink, but he didn't have no money. So they said if he knocked out that horse, the drinks would be free for all his friends and himself. So he knocked out that horse. The last one that almost ruined his career, it was, I think it was a time of a revolution or some riots were happening, and they were close to his home. And Roberto Duran's mom was outside, and some guy, I think, was trying to hit his mom, so he pounced on him, and he got arrested for that. And his career was just coming up. I think he was already a world champion. I think, and he went to jail. And his manager Carlos Celeta, he was a millionaire, but he said, I don't want to release him because he has to learn. He has to learn eventually. So he spent the night in jail, a few nights in jail, I think. And Duran told the guards, he's like, dude, I was just defending myself. I was just defending my mother. He tried to hit my mother. And they're like, really, Duran? He's like, yes. They're like, all right, you could go out. So his career was almost over because of that. Duran's legend. This book is like Duran's legend, his career. That's why it's life and legend, because they're separate, but it's the same. You can't separate Duran, the man, from the legend, because everyone says that when they looked into his eyes, they did see, some resemblance of evil, which was what the fighters were saying at that time. Duran said, I would KO God if I had to. I think that's a real gangster. All right. The Ray Lampkin fight was where he knocked this guy out. Ray Lampkin was a solid fighter, but he knocked him out in the 14th round. His head hit the ground, and he had to go to the hospital. He got a concussion. There was something else wrong. I don't remember, but this is where Duran said, "This time I send him to the hospital. Next time I send him to the morgue." And that was his attitude all the fights. And he said, again, he would have done it to me. He would have done it to me. He had a few tough fights, like the Verjuet fights, where he couldn't knock these Verjuet fighters out. The Esteban de Jesus, the third fight, which was his last defense of that lightweight title before he moved up to welterweight division. And before all these fights, even the lower fights, they still give a summary about his opponent. So that's another great thing about it. They give mini biographies too. The third fight, of course, the Brujeria. Duran was consulting all these people. The book has it as Duran loved to consult with a bunch of quacks. They say that later, but it's still. Duran knocks him out in the 12th round, satisfying victory, his last defense of the lightweight title. So because he was having a lot of trouble making lightweight, he moves up. He fights a few weaker opposition, not world class fighters. And then he gets to fight Carlos Palomino, who was a good fighter. He only had one loss to Wilfred Benitez. And Duran, this was supposed to be a tough test. Carlos Palomino's a good fighter. And Duran just beats him up for 10 rounds. And Palomino's like, man, I did not expect Duran to be that tough of a fighter, especially coming up from lightweight. But he got beat up. The Carlos Palomino wanted three things. He wanted to graduate college, which he did. He wanted to be a world champion, and he wanted to graduate by the time he was 30. And he did all that. And good for him. He became a world champion when he beat a lot of defenses, actually. When he beat John H. Stacy, I'll say how many defenses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7 defenses until losing to Wilfred Benitez. And then he graduated on his 30th birthday. So he's a man that did it how he wanted to do it. And he's a Hall of Famer too. And Duran made easy work. You want to say easy work? This was it. Roberto Duran had Carlos Palomino afraid of him. He was feigning everywhere, and this guy's like, oh, he was afraid of Roberto Duran. So this is the fight that had Roberto Duran the number one contender for the welterweight title. And he was in line to fight Benitez, but Benitez then eventually lost to Sugar Ray Leonard. And this was Duran's greatest victory. Like I've said before, Sugar Ray Leonard let Duran get to him. He let the image get to Duran. Duran would just stare holes through him. The first time he met him, Leonard tried to shake his hand, and Duran's like, get the fuck out of here, faggot. And he would do gestures to his groin in front of his family, in front of Sugar Ray's family. And he was just thinking of himself, like, dude, how could someone do this in front of my family? But they did. And he let Roberto Duran get to him. He said, I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna beat you up. And it showed in the ring. It was a spectacular fight, as we all know. And after the fight, the crowd celebrated. Everybody celebrated. All of Panama celebrated. And the celebrations did not stop. Roberto Duran went to Panama, ate, drank, everything. He got fat. And Sugar Ray Leonard and his team made a rematch. They're like, I want a rematch in 3 months. And Carlos Celeta, Duran's manager, said, all right, because he saw Duran get his $1 million payday from fighting Sugar Ray Leonard the first time. He saw Duran just giving money away, just eating food, just feeding all of Panama. He saw this and he said, if Duran doesn't fight Leonard in 3 months, he's gonna fight someone else, and he's gonna lose to someone else that isn't even on his level. So Carlos Zeleta made this fight. Sugar Ray Leonard knew Duran would gorge himself and he would be way overweight, had to struggle a lot to make weight. So he made the fight real quick. First fight was so he made that fight. And Roberto Duran, he says he ballooned up to 225 pounds. Other sources say he was up to 195. But if he was 225, damn. That's 78 pounds he had to lose just to fight Sugar Ray Leonard in a few months, man. 78 pounds. Man. So he was doing everything just to lose the weight. He really didn't train. He didn't train for the fight. He just trained to lose weight. He was not prepared for a world championship fight. So comes the day of the fight. They had same day weigh-ins. Duran made weight. Leonard made weight, but Duran was like a walking corpse that day. And he was starving when he hit the scales. He was starving. Okay, I'll read a passage from it. It may be the most notorious pre-fight meal in history. At 1 a.m. in the weigh-in, having made the weight, Duran gorged. And it said, right here. According to various reports, Duran then consumed 2 eggs, grits, peaches, toast, an orange, 2 T-bone steaks, peas, french fries, and fried chicken. Wait. He rounded off the meal with beef consomme, hot tea, water, Kool-Aid, and 4 glasses of orange juice. After the weigh-in, and he had to fight that day. Duran was extremely bloated. He had stomach pains. And the fight wasn't exactly brutal, but Leonard was just clowning. Leonard clowned, he moved, he boxed effectively. I'm not going to take anything away from Leonard's performance. He clowned, he moved. People found it very disrespectful, and he even got a little bit of crap for doing what he did, but Leonard knew that's the way you got to beat Duran. That is the way you got to beat him. So Duran, he's really not in shape to fight, and Leonard is. And that's the story of the fight. And come the what round was it? The 8th round, he wasn't beating him up though. Leonard was just winning. He was scoring points. But Leonard comes in. Leonard throws a few shots. He does the bolo punch. He does the ollie shuffle. And after the round, as we all know, Duran turns his back, waves his hand, and he says, "Ya no quiero pelear con ese payaso," and which is, I don't want to fight with that clown anymore. He never said no mas. The referee says that after he said that, he said, "Oh, you're gonna fight?" He said no mas after that. But most reporters say that they never heard the words no mas, but that will stain him for the rest of his life, unfortunately. And Duran, there's a lot of excuses Duran put. He said because of the fight meal, because of the weight, because of some drink he took to lose weight. He had bad stomach cramps, and there was reports from a doctor that said that he did have stomach cramps and that he would have eventually passed out in the ring if he hadn't done that. Other doctors say that it's bullcrap, that they didn't find anything of Duran. They didn't find any stomach cramps. They didn't find none of that. So there's a lot of reasoning. Duran says for the stomach cramps, for the pains, and because because Leonard wasn't fighting him. He loved to fight. He was a macho man from Panama. He wanted to fight. He wanted people to fight him, and Leonard refused to fight him. The one that also makes sense, it's that he didn't want to fight him, but it's also Duran was very spontaneous. He was a man that felt like doing something and he did it. That's Duran. So in that moment, in that brief moment, he wasn't thinking about the consequences. He just thought, nah, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it anymore. I got stomach cramps. This guy is a clown. He don't want to fight me. I think that's it. Of course, we'll never know. But I think that's it. Duran, the spontaneous man, he just was in the moment and he said, I don't want to fight. So he didn't fight anymore. He didn't see it as quitting. He just saw it as, I don't want to fight anymore. After that, Duran, there's really no regret in Duran. He went back to the hotels. He was eating, messing around with people. He was doing karaoke with his wife. And his trainers, Ray Arcel and Freddie Brown, come in. They're disgusted, dude. They're disgusted. Like, man, you just lost and you're out here partying like if you won. So Carlos Zeleta, who Duran actually would call Papa, he went into the fight. Into the hotel, and he's like, hey, you gotta go, man. So he left. He was in Zeleta's car, and that's when Duran just starts crying. He just starts crying because he knew he messed up, and Carlos Zeleta was gonna judge him for that. Duran knew he couldn't go back to Panama after that. He didn't go to Panama for like 3 weeks. He stayed in Miami. He just stayed in his home. Then he left to Panama. They tagged on his mother's house. They did a bunch of stuff in Panama, man, because Duran was the hero and he was a symbol of machismo. And he quit. Duran quit. Oh, he went back to Panama, stayed in his home for a long time, just in his home. People came to visit. His wife's like, come on, get out, hon. And he's like, no, I don't want to fight anymore. So he didn't fight almost for a year. He's like, ugh. And from a loss like that, it's really hard to come back from that. Really hard. Duran was just dwelling in his own misery after that. But he eventually came back. He looked horrible in his comebacks. He looked fat. He looked flabby. He didn't really train for those fights. He came in not overweight, but he had weight issues. 2 of his fights, they went the distance against Nino Gonzalez and Luigi Minchilo. They went the distance. Then he fought Wilfred Benitez, who was a stylist, he was a great boxer, but didn't have much power. And Wilfred Benitez beat him. He was a Hall of Famer, and Duran was in good shape. He actually was in good shape because he wanted that junior middleweight title, but it wasn't meant to be. Wilfred Benitez was just the better fighter. He was a taller fighter. He had range on him. It was not to be that day. Duran couldn't get off, and he was, like I said, he was in good shape for that fight. He just couldn't beat the better man. Then the upset came. Probably 1982, his worst year. He had 2 losses. Kirkland Lane. That's when he lost to Kirkland Lane, who was 23-3-1, which is a good record. But to fight a Roberto Duran and beat a Roberto Duran who had only lost to very good fighters, elite competition thus far, Duran lost. It was a close fight, but Duran lost a split decision. Then he was considering retirement after that. Some of his team actually left him. And he just went back to partying, to getting drunk, to having sex with a lot of women. And his career was kind of viewed as over already. this why when he was got that Pipino Cuevas fight, both of their careers were in question. Both of their careers were said to be over. Both of their primes were over. And even though they had both been monsters in their time, it was this was a crossroads fight. Sorry, it was a crossroads fight, one that both the men had to win. Pepino Cuevas was a favorite, but he was no match for Roberto Duran. Roberto Duran's old glory came back. Pepino Cuevas, he only had one way of fighting, and when Roberto Duran beat him at that way of fighting, he beat him at that way of fighting. There was no way Pepino Cuevas was gonna win. He just totally dominated, and this was kind of a resurgence of his career, of Roberto Duran's past glory. Now he was gonna get that fight with Davey Moore. So Davey Moore was a youngster. He had 12 fights, 12-0. He had won the world title. I believe it was in his 8th fight. Just checking. In his 9th fight, he won the world title from Tadashi Mihara, who from Japan. He won it in Japan by a 6-round knockout. He hit a few defenses by now. And he was a favorite. He was a muscular dude. He was from New York. And this fight was in New York. So, Davey Moore is going to be the favorite. But no, the crowd was for Duran. Because the legend still lived. The legend was still there. He was still the man. And Davey Moore was having struggle. He was having struggle this time making weight. And Duran made weight just fine. And after he made weight, he ate. Because Duran loved to eat. He loved to gorge himself. And he ate. He was eating right in front of Davey Moore. Davey Moore weighed 156. And he had to go and make weight. And Duran's like, I'm not leaving until this fool makes weight. And he was just eating. Oh, man. But the fight, Davey Moore was never the same after that. Duran totally destroyed him. Everybody wanted the fight to be stopped before it actually was. It wasn't stopped until Davey Moore's corner threw in the towel, and even the ref didn't see that, and Duran still got a few more shots after that. Duran's old glory once again had come back. Redemption. Duran's career was a career of comebacks. Next, it goes by one by one fights of the rest of his great fights. Marvin Hagler, where they said Hagler was actually sort of intimidated of Duran. He respected the legend of Duran. There was a moment where they were walking and Duran's like, "Hey, Hagler," and then he did his usual Duran thing, and Hagler just didn't do anything back, and people saw that as a sign of fear. That they didn't see the usual seek and destroy Marvin Hagler. They saw another Hagler that was more respectful of his opponent, and that's what you saw in the ring. You saw Duran that kind of wanted to outbox him, outthink his opponent. But from being an actual lightweight, it spoke volumes to Roberto Duran's ability to last 15 rounds with a monster like Marvin Hagler. That's why what happened next was just crazy. If Duran intimidated Hagler, Tommy Hearns intimidated Duran. Yes, Roberto Duran had never been intimidated in his life. No. And had never really been knocked out. But he was intimidated by by Thomas Hearns. Believe it. There was a moment in the pre-fight build-up where Roberto Duran was wearing a hat, and Tommy Hearns passes by, and knocks his and hits his hat so the hat would cover his eyes. And Roberto Duran just turned away. He was very intimidated of Tommy Hearns. And Roberto Duran, once again, was not in shape. He had been eating a lot. He was in no condition to fight such a monster that had everything, all the tools to fight against Roberto Duran. Tommy Hearns just had everything to counter everything that Duran had. Everything. Power, reach, height, and he used it, and he knocked him out fast. And once again, people were contemplating Roberto Duran's retirement. Once again, Duran was like, I don't know if I'm going to keep fighting. But what are you going to do when that's your whole life? Really, Duran was a fighter. That's all he knows. So, the next few years, Roberto Duran goes. And some fights he looks good. But some fights he loses to subpar competition like Robbie Sims. He lost to Robbie Sims, which was Hagler's half-brother, in what is said to be a very good fight. Roberto Duran was bleeding. They were both bleeding. But Robbie Sims wins a split decision. He goes on to fight subpar competition. It was the late 80s. He had about 2 decades of fighting already. So he goes on. He's beating these guys, Paul Thorne, Jeff Lanas, Ricky Stackhouse, which really can't hold his jackstrap. So that Jeff Lanas fight, he went the split decision with this guy who was 16-3. But he always wanted that 4th title, that middleweight title. And that title escaped him when he failed to beat Marvelous Marvin Hagler. But now he had another shot. But that was against Iran Barkley, who people were scared. People were scared for Duran, for Duran's life. Because you just look at Iran Barkley, man. Just look at him. He's a scary dude. Saying nothing about race, nothing about anything. Iran Barkley is a scary dude. Right? Yes. Yes, he is. People were saying that they were scared for Duran's life, all this. Even his children were like, man, I'm kind of scared for this. But Duran, this was his last hurrah. The Iran Barkley fight was his last great win. It was his last great win against Iran Barkley. He did a spectacular performance. And after that, everyone, pretty much all of his old team had left him. Ray Arcel, Freddie Brown, Carlos Celeta, all of those guys had left him. Besides his old trainer from when he was still fighting amateur in Panama, Plomo. He was his trainer through thick and through thin. He was the only one that was still with him. And Roberto Duran pulled him off, celebrated. I can't imagine being in one of those buildings in one of those fights where Roberto Duran fought and won, especially in his comeback fights like Pipino Cuevas, like David Moore, or like Iran Barkley. I just can't imagine being there and feeling. It's the feeling, man. The feeling of greatness that you just saw something great, something powerful, like the legend. So, next fight was against Sugar Ray Leonard, which the author pointed out as his last significant fight. They were both out of shape. They were both old, trying to relive their old glory. But Roberto Duran had fought for years, and he wanted that rematch for years. But finally, it was now 1989. But yeah, this was a nothing fight. His next fight against Pat Lawler, he got injured. His shoulder got injured, and he retired. He didn't retire from fighting. He retired it during the fight. They said he quit, but his shoulder was injured, and the fight got stopped because of that. And the rest of his career, the 90s, was kind of insignificant. Was a time where he was trying to live his past glories, where he would still beat subpar competition, but not elite competition, not world champions. That was the 90s for Roberto Duran. And I've been saying, but it still speaks volumes that Roberto Duran could beat these young cats, at, even in his 40s and 50s. He could still beat young people. Yes, they were subpar, but he was always a fighter, and he could still knock you out. To knock someone out, that's not easy. So his last, he fought Vinny Paz. He dropped him, but he eventually lost the unanimous decision against Vinny Paz. The second fight wasn't so close. Hector Camacho, he lost to Macho Camacho. He lost to Jorge Castro just to get his win back. Don King allowed a massacre with William Joppy. Shame on you, Don King. Shame on you. It was a horrible sight, and someone should have been arrested for making that fight, man. It was not sport. It was just a massacre that wasn't fair to make. So he got his win against Pat Lawler back, and he ended his career against Hector Macho Camacho in that rematch. But he didn't want to stop fighting. He wanted to keep fighting because, like I've said, that's all he ever knew, how to fight. But he got in a car accident. He suffered various injuries, including 4 broken ribs. So he had to retire. So he always wanted to come back to fighting. He never wanted to stop, but he had to. He had to now. It was old age. It was injuries. But his family was very happy. His mother was especially happy that he quit fighting. His children were happy. And now he could spend time with his family. And the book pretty much ends speaking more about the legend. Like I've said, it was hard. It is hard to separate the legend from the reality. And he tells another legend where Roberto Duran is flying a plane and he didn't have a fighter pilot license, and he was crashing. It was during the 80s, and he was gonna crash, and he's like, I can't die now. So he crashed into the water, and he swam 2 miles offshore onto shore to save his own life. He swam 2 miles from the ocean to shore. That's another legend. But the one that really can be proved is the one where Duran was extremely generous to his people, where he loved the people of Panama, and he would just give money away like it was nothing. That's why Duran needed to keep fighting, because he was in debt. His wife was a gambling addict, and Duran just gave money to kids. He gave them to relatives too. He gave it to poor people. He would give it $10,000 at a time. He would feed hundreds of people at the same time at restaurants. He didn't care. That's the love Duran had. And that is why he is so loved, because he would give to everyone like if they were his family, like if they were blood. And it's something even deeper than blood, because you're not just going to give money even to your family. But Duran did to someone that wasn't, to complete strangers, because he loved them. He did. And the people loved him back. And out of all the fighters, it said, out of all the fighters, yeah, even beat Duran, like Ray Leonard, Tommy Hearns, and Hagler. Sure, they all beat him. But of all those people, who was more loved amongst their own country, and who would you rather hang out with? It would be Roberto Duran, because he was so loving. Even though he had that image back in the day of a monster, of a killer, he was still really loving to his people, and loving and caring and charitable to everybody that he was around with. And that's the legend of Roberto Duran. A great fighter and a great person. Someone that gave it all, that didn't care about being millions of dollars in debt to the IRS, to all these other places, just to give a little bit back to his community, to the people that he loved, to the people that he related to his people. That's Roberto Duran's life and legend. Thank you everyone for watching, and I do really recommend buying this book. You guys have a great day. Peace.